As we navigate the ever-evolving path of life, certain milestones naturally prompt a deeper reflection of how we live and what we value. Reaching the age of 60 is one such pivotal moment. It's a time when many of us pause, not just to look back at where we've been, but to consciously choose how we want to move forward. In this phase, one truth becomes undeniable. Our time is incredibly precious. How we choose to spend it, who we spend it with, what we give our energy to, has a profound impact on our happiness, health, and overall well-being. For me, turning 60 was both a reckoning and a release. It was a chapter that opened with clarity and a sense of urgency, not the kind fueled by panic, but by a renewed understanding of what truly brings joy, purpose, and peace. Many of the routines, roles, and beliefs I clung to in earlier decades no longer fit the person I had become, and so began a journey of letting go. These are the 11 meaningful and at times difficult things I chose to quit after turning 60, and how each decision reshaped my life for the better. 1. Quitting work for the sake of working. When I was younger, work consumed a large portion of my identity. It was easy to get swept up in the grind, pushing through long hours, chasing promotions, and equating success with productivity. The culture of overworking rewarded busyness, and I believed that being perpetually in motion meant I was doing something right. But after turning 60, I began to question what all that work was really for. Was I working towards something meaningful, or just keeping busy out of habit? The truth is that constant hustle took a toll. It left me feeling depleted and, ironically, unfulfilled. I realized that continuing to work without purpose had become more of a burden than a benefit, so I made a deliberate shift. Today I approach work with greater intention. Before committing to extra hours or new projects, I ask myself, why am I doing this? Does it align with a deeper goal, passion, or value? If the answer is no, I walk away. I've discovered that fulfillment doesn't come from the number of hours I put in. It comes from how I spend the hours I have. This change has allowed me to rediscover what matters most. I now invest my time in pursuits that energize me, whether it's connecting with loved ones, exploring hobbies, or simply enjoying a peaceful afternoon. And perhaps most importantly, I've come to redefine wealth, not in dollars, but in the richness of experiences, relationships, and inner peace. Work no longer defines me, purpose does. 2. Quitting mindless spending. Living in a consumer-driven society makes it incredibly easy to equate buying with being. For years, I shopped out of habit, accumulating items I didn't need and chasing temporary joy through purchases. There was always something new to acquire, some sale too good to pass up. I convinced myself that each new item would bring satisfaction, but that contentment was always fleeting. With age came a shift in perspective. I began to see that mindless spending wasn't just about the money. It was about trying to fill emotional gaps with things. It often stemmed from a desire to escape discomfort or to conform to expectations. But as I've grown older, I've learned to distinguish between genuine needs and passing wants. I now spend with intention and awareness. If something doesn't add true value to my life or spark real joy, I let it go. This doesn't mean I live frugally out of necessity. It means I live mindfully out of choice. I've redirected my resources toward experiences and items that enhance my well-being and deepen my life. Whether it's a meaningful trip, a creative class, or a high-quality tool that simplifies daily living, I invest in what matters. The result? Greater financial freedom, less clutter, and a clearer sense of what truly brings happiness. 3. Quitting. Stressing over the small stuff. In my younger years, I often got tangled up in minor frustrations, missed appointments, long lines, traffic delays, or miscommunications. These little irritants would gnaw at me, throwing off my mood and perspective. But now, with the advantage of hindsight and age, I've come to realize how little those things truly matter. the stress they caused was disproportionate to their actual impact. I started asking myself a simple question: will this matter a year from now? If the answer was no, and it usually was, I let it go. Learning to release the small stuff was one of the most liberating choices I've ever made. Life is far too short to waste energy on trivial matters. Of course, it's not about becoming indifferent, it's about becoming intentional. I focus on what I can control and accept what I cannot. That shift has brought a deep sense of calm. I no longer strive for perfection or fret over unpredictability. Life is inherently messy, and I've learned to embrace its imperfections with grace. In doing so, I've found more room for joy, creativity, and connection. 4. Quitting neglecting self-care. For many years, I put myself last on the list. Like so many others, I poured my energy into meeting obligations, supporting others, and checking off to-dos. I viewed self-care as indulgent, something to be earned rather than a necessity. But turning 60 was a wake-up call. It made me see that if I didn't start caring for myself, no one else could do it for me. So I began prioritizing self-care, not as an afterthought, but as a foundational habit. This included nurturing not just my body, but also my mind and spirit. I began meditating regularly, practicing daily gratitude, moving my body, and carving out time for joy. Whether it's reading in silence, gardening, or simply sitting with a cup of tea, I've come to see these moments as essential rather than optional. And the surprising part? As I started showing up for myself, I found I had more to give to others. Self-care isn't selfish. It's the fuel that allows me to be fully present, loving, and engaged in the life I want to lead. Prioritizing my well-being has deepened my sense of self-worth and restored a quiet, steady joy that I hadn't felt in years. 5. Quitting. Overcommitting to others. There was a time when I said yes far too often. I volunteered, attended events, and took on responsibilities, even when I was exhausted or uninterested, because I didn't want to disappoint anyone. I believed that being helpful or agreeable meant being kind, but all too often, it left me depleted and resentful. After turning 60, I realized that time is the most valuable currency I have. Spending it wisely means being selective about where I invest my energy. I've since embraced the power of saying no without guilt. I no longer agree to things out of obligation or fear of disapproval. Instead, I ask myself, does this bring me joy? Does it align with my values? This shift has been deeply empowering. Saying no when something doesn't feel right has given me the space to say yes to what truly matters. I now have more room for meaningful conversations, creative pursuits, and rest. More importantly, I've begun showing up in my relationships with authenticity and sincerity. Not because I should, but because I genuinely want to. 6. Quitting unhealthy relationships. One of the hardest truths I had to face after turning 60 was that not all relationships are meant to last. Some linger out of habit, history, or guilt, even when they become toxic or draining. For much of my life, I held on to these relationships out of fear. Fear of conflict, fear of loneliness, fear of being seen as unkind. But eventually, I reached a point where the emotional toll became too high. I started examining the people in my life through a simple lens. Do they uplift me or do they drain me? Do our interactions feel mutual and respectful? If the answer was no, I began to gently distance myself. Letting go of certain connections wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Now I choose to surround myself with people who are supportive, genuine, and loving. Relationships rooted in mutual care bring a lightness and depth that I never knew I was missing. The space created by letting go of the wrong people has made room for the right ones and for deeper connection with myself. 7. Quitting. Neglecting my physical and mental health. For decades, I put my well-being on the back burner. There was always something else to do. Another deadline, another errand, another responsibility. I told myself I'd focus on my health someday. But at 60, I had to admit that someday had arrived. The luxury of waiting no longer existed. I finally began treating my health like the non-negotiable foundation it truly is. I adopted a simple, sustainable exercise routine, daily walks that nourish both my body and mind. I started cooking more whole foods, drinking more water, and paying attention to how I felt. But it wasn't just about physical health. I also began to prioritize mental and emotional wellness. Meditation, mindfulness, and journaling became regular practices. The results were transformative. My energy increased, my mood lifted, I became more present, more grounded. Good health isn't about perfection. It's about vitality, freedom, and the ability to fully engage with life. And that's exactly what I've found by finally making my health a priority. 8. Quitting procrastination on personal goals. There were always dreams tucked in the corners of my mind, unfinished projects, places I wanted to see, hobbies I meant to try, but I kept putting them off, telling myself there would be time later. Turning 60 reminded me that later isn't guaranteed. If something matters, the time to begin is now. So I stopped waiting. I began setting small, intentional goals and working toward them each day. Some were creative, writing, painting, learning. Others were adventurous, traveling solo, exploring new cities, trying new cuisines. What mattered most was that I was finally honoring my aspirations instead of postponing them. Taking action rekindled a sense of purpose and excitement. I no longer view age as a barrier. It's a motivator. Life is happening now, and I want to be fully present for it. 9. Quitting fear of aging. If there's one message society seems determined to send, it's that aging is something to resist, delay, or dread. From anti-aging creams to youth-centric marketing, we're constantly told that getting older means becoming less relevant, less attractive, less capable. For years, I absorbed that messaging without even realizing it. I quietly feared the wrinkles, the slower pace, the changing body. I mourned the passing of time instead of celebrating all it had given me. But after turning 60, something remarkable happened. I stopped seeing age as the enemy. I started to see it as a gift. Because the truth is, aging has brought me a clarity and depth I never had in my 20s or 30s. I've come to respect the journey that got me here. The scars, the lessons, the triumphs. Every gray hair, every laugh line, every experience etched into my being is a mark of life, fully lived. I no longer chase youth. I embrace wisdom. I focus less on appearance and more on vitality. I nourish my body, but I also celebrate it for all it has carried me through. Aging isn't about decline. It's about transformation. It's about finally owning who I am without apology. I've quit fearing age, and in doing so, I've discovered the fierce beauty of growing older on my own terms. 10. Quitting. Trying to please everyone. For much of my life, I believed that being liked equaled being worthy. I became adept at tuning into what others needed, often at the expense of my own needs. I played peacemaker, over-explained my choices, and worried endlessly about how I was perceived. I wanted to be seen as kind, reliable, good. But that approval often came at the cost of authenticity. I was molding myself to fit into someone else's version of who I should be. Turning 60 changed that. I came to understand that trying to please everyone is not only impossible, it's exhausting. More importantly, it's a surefire way to lose yourself. So I quit. I quit editing myself to make others comfortable. I quit apologizing for my boundaries, my voice, my truth. I stopped seeking validation outside myself and began rooting my worth from within. This wasn't an overnight shift. It was gradual, uncomfortable, and at times lonely. But the freedom it brought was unlike anything I'd known. I began showing up in my relationships and communities as my whole self, imperfect but real. And while not everyone applauded the change, those who truly mattered respected, and embraced it. People-pleasing is a heavy mask. Laying it down has allowed me to breathe deeper and live lighter. 11. Quitting. Waiting for the right time. For decades, I held off on dreams and decisions because it wasn't the right time. I'd wait until I had more money, more energy, fewer responsibilities, better weather, or just the perfect circumstances. I told myself I was being smart, careful, responsible. But in truth, I was letting fear and uncertainty disguise themselves as prudence. And while I waited, time moved on. Turning 60 was a wake-up call I couldn't ignore. It made me realize that the right time is often a myth. There is rarely a moment when everything aligns perfectly. More often, we must act with what we have, where we are, and trust that the path will reveal itself as we go. So I stopped waiting. I booked the trip. I started the project. I reached out. I made the move. And every time I acted, even with doubt still present, something beautiful happened. Momentum. Life responded to my bravery with opportunities, insights, and joy I never would have encountered if I'd stayed frozen. Now I live with more urgency, but not the frantic kind. It's the urgency born from gratitude, from knowing that time is limited and precious. I no longer postpone joy or passion in the name of perfect timing. I say yes when my heart nudges me. I begin, even if the finish line is unclear, because the only time we truly have is now. What I gained by letting go. Looking back on these 11 things I've quit, I don't see loss. I see expansion. Each act of letting go made room for something richer, something more aligned. I've gained presence. I've gained clarity. I've gained peace. I've redefined success on my own terms, measured not by titles or possessions, but by connection, purpose, and joy. Here are a few unexpected gifts that came from quitting what no longer served me. Deeper relationships. By releasing toxic dynamics and people-pleasing, I created space for authentic connections. My relationships now feel more mutual, honest, and nourishing. True freedom. Letting go of societal expectations and self-imposed obligations has given me the freedom to live as I choose, not recklessly, but deliberately. Joy in simplicity. I no longer chase grand achievements to feel valuable. I find joy in small, everyday moments: a slow walk, a quiet conversation, a sunset, a book, a renewed sense of self. With each habit or mindset I released, I reclaimed a piece of myself. I've become more grounded, more confident, and more in tune with my own truth. Advice to those approaching 60 or any life transition. You don't need to wait for a milestone birthday to begin a new chapter. Whether you're 30, 50, 70, or beyond, these lessons are timeless. If you feel stuck, if you sense that parts of your life no longer reflect who you are or who you want to become, consider this your invitation. Start with one small thing. Ask yourself what you've outgrown, what you're tolerating, what you're afraid to let go of. You don't need to make a dramatic change overnight, but you do deserve a life that feels honest and expansive. And every step toward that life begins with a decision to quit what no longer serves you. Here are a few reflective prompts that helped me along the way. What am I holding on to out of habit or fear? Which parts of my routine bring energy, and which ones drain it? If I weren't afraid, what would I start today? What do I want to be true about my life 1 year from now? Write your answers down. Speak them aloud. Share them with someone you trust. Then take one action, however small, that brings you closer to your truth. There's a quiet power in quitting, but not the kind of quitting we're taught to avoid. This isn't about giving up. It's about giving in to the wisdom that comes with age, the clarity that comes with experience, and the freedom that comes from choosing yourself. Quitting these 11 things wasn't easy. It required courage, reflection, and a willingness to disappoint others in service of honoring myself. But I can say with full confidence, It was worth it. I've never felt more grounded, more open, or more alive. Aging isn't something to fear. It's a powerful invitation to live more honestly. And if we're brave enough to listen, it can lead us to a life of deep joy, true connection, and lasting peace. So here's to shedding what no longer fits. Here's to starting again at any age. And here's to the version of you that's waiting on the other side of letting go.